When I moved into Maple Grove Estates, a quiet little HOA-controlled neighborhood with cookie-cutter homes and pristine lawns, all I wanted was some peace and a place where my animals could live freely. Of course, I read the HOA rules carefully more like skimmed them, and nowhere did it say anything explicitly about chickens. So naturally, I set up a cozy coop in the backyard for my 5 rescued hens: Henny, Cluck Norris, Yoko Ono, Nugget, and Beyonce. They were quiet. Cleaner than most neighborhood kids, honestly. They even laid eggs like little breakfast angels. Life was good until she noticed. Enter Karen Strickland, president of the HOA and self-appointed tyrant of suburbia. The woman had a bob haircut sharp enough to slice deli meat and a whistle she wore like a badge of honor. She lived 3 houses down, but somehow made it her mission to patrol every inch of the block with the determination of a mall cop who got denied from the real academy. It started with a note taped to my door in Comic Sans. Backyard poultry is discouraged. Kindly rehome your chickens within 7 days or face fines. HOA management. Discouraged? Not banned. I ignored it. 3 days later, another note, this time bolded and laminated. She was escalating. This is your final warning. Chickens are not acceptable in a residential area. Consider this an official HOA citation. Now, hold on. I had barely been there a month, and she was already trying to turn me into an outlaw over a couple of well-behaved hens? I decided to respond. Civilly. I left her a dozen eggs in a recycled carton with a note that said, "Courtesy of the backyard criminals. Sunny side up. Big mistake." The next morning, I woke up to her standing on my porch, arms folded like she was about to call a SWAT team. "You think this is funny?" she asked, voice sharp as an ice pick. "Chickens are livestock. This is a residential neighborhood, not a farm." I tried to explain they were part of my rescue program, but she cut me off like I was a telemarketer during dinner. "I don't care if they're royal chickens flown in from Buckingham Palace. They violate HOA Code 14B-7. I asked to see that code. She didn't have a copy. Instead, she slapped a fine notice in my hand for $250 and said she'd be back with animal control if I didn't get rid of them. Little did she know my chickens were just the beginning. Henny was the friendliest, but she wasn't even the weirdest thing in my yard. I had a secret that Karen wasn't ready for. Not even close. She thought she was battling a chicken-loving hippie. She had no idea she had just declared war on an entire underground animal rescue operation. Karen strutted away from my porch like she'd just dropped the mic at a city council meeting. I closed the door and turned to Henny, who had wandered into the house like she owned the place. "Well, girl," I sighed, rubbing her fluffy head. "Looks like it's time to let the others out." Karen thought she was just dealing with a rogue chicken lady. She didn't know I was running a fully licensed and very private nonprofit animal rescue. It wasn't public, it wasn't flashy, but it was legal. I'd kept it quiet out of respect for the neighborhood vibe. But if Karen wanted to play games, then fine. I had nothing to hide. In fact, I was about to put on the best petting zoo HOA Karen had ever seen, whether she liked it or not. Out back, I opened the gate to a camouflaged enclosure hidden behind my tool shed. One by one, the residents waddled, hopped, or trotted out. A pair of orphan goats. A 3-legged pig named Lieutenant Dan. A duck with attitude issues. A rescued parrot that cussed like a pirate. 2 turtles that hated each other. And a sleepy old llama named Carl. They were all rescues. Some from neglect, others abandoned. I had the paperwork, permits, and even a quiet partnership with a local vet, but I'd kept everything under the radar until now. I started cleaning the coop, brushing the llama, and setting up a few "animal rescue in progress, do not disturb" signs along the edge of my property. If Karen wanted a reason to knock on my door again, I was gonna give her plenty. By the following morning, she was back. This time with backup. Her sidekick, Marlene, stood with her at the edge of my driveway like a suburban SWAT team. Karen was clutching a clipboard. Marlene had a phone in her hand and the world's smuggest smile. I counted 2 goats, a pig, a llama, and I heard a parrot yelling about someone's mother. Is this a zoo now? Karen barked. I smiled sweetly. It's an animal rescue, Karen. Fully licensed. Nonprofit. Want to see the papers? Karen's eyes narrowed like she smelled gluten in her salad. This violates HOA rules. Nope, I said, pulling out a copy of the HOA guidelines. There's nothing in here banning rescue animals. And since I'm not breeding, selling, or running a commercial farm, I'm in the clear. Section 9C. Marlene squinted at the paper, then whispered to Karen, she's right. Karen's face turned a shade of red usually reserved for malfunctioning microwaves. She tried again. Then I'll call animal control. Already been here, I said, patting Carl the llama. They inspected us last year. Passed with flying colors. The parrot squawked from the porch. Suck it, Karen. I swear I didn't teach it that. Karen stormed off in a rage, mumbling something about lawsuit and zoning violations. But I could tell this wasn't over for her. Karen wasn't the kind of woman who gave up after one loss. She was going to come back harder, meaner, and probably with a new haircut. Fine by me. I wasn't just ready. I was locked and loaded with goats, chickens, and a deeply vengeful parrot. Karen was quiet for 2 days. That alone was suspicious. Normally, she paraded around the neighborhood with a whistle and a fanny pack full of HOA citations like some kind of authoritarian Easter bunny. But now, silence. No notes. No passive-aggressive lawn inspections. No complaints about non-regulation birdhouses. Just nothing. Which meant only one thing. She was plotting. Sure enough, on the 3rd day, it began. I was sipping coffee on my porch, Carl the llama lazily chewing hay beside me, when a city inspector rolled up in a white pickup. Hi there, he said, adjusting his ball cap. Got a complaint about livestock on the property. I didn't even flinch. From Karen. The inspector chuckled. Let's just say it was. Strongly worded. I gave him the grand tour. The enclosures, the paperwork, the permits, the veterinary sign-off. He nodded, scribbled, even pet the pig. Lieutenant Dan winked at him, I swear. Well, he said finally, everything seems legit. You're good to go. Karen was peeking through her blinds, fuming so hard I could practically see steam escaping from her ears. I waved. That afternoon, I found a new note duct taped to my mailbox. She was getting desperate. The HO's board will be convening an emergency vote to revise Section 9C. Effective immediately, all non-domestic animals will be prohibited. So now she was changing the rules mid-game? Cute. I emailed the city. Turns out, HOA rules can't override local ordinances or state animal welfare laws. Changing a clause didn't make my rescue illegal, it just made Karen look like she'd lost her mind over a few chickens and a mildly judgmental parrot. That evening, she gathered her cronies for an emergency HOA vote in her front yard, complete with folding chairs, lemonade, and passive-aggressive clipboards. I set up my own little counter-programming. From my lawn, Carl the llama wore a straw hat. Nugget the chicken sat on a picnic blanket. The parrot? Front and center, repeating everything Karen said with dramatic flair. Karen, this is a serious violation of neighborhood standards. Parrot, Karen is a menace to society. Karen, the smell alone. Parrot, you smell, Karen. Every now and then, someone in her little gathering snorted. Even Marlene was trying not to laugh. Then it happened. Karen stood up, fuming, and tried to march across the lawn to confront me directly. But Carl had been watching her, and Carl had opinions. The second she crossed the invisible boundary of his patience, he reared his head, let out a disgruntled grunt, and launched the most magnificent glob of llama spit I'd ever seen. Right in the middle of her new blouse. Everyone gasped. Karen froze. The parrot squawked triumphantly. Boom. Llama strike. She screamed, like full volume, horror movie scream, then stormed off to her house like she'd just been personally attacked by nature. Honestly, she had. By that night, HOA Karen had officially declared war. Flyers were going up, neighbors were being canvassed, petitions were being waved like swords. But I had news for her. The neighborhood wasn't just watching anymore. Some were joining. And Karen? She was about to find out that her tidy little kingdom had more animals than she could ever control. Karen wasn't just mad anymore, she was on a mission from Satan. The day after the Great Llama Spit incident, flyers appeared on every door in the neighborhood titled, "Save Our Streets. Remove the Rescue ZO." In big red letters, it warned of unhygienic conditions, nocturnal animal howling, and a claim that my backyard pig had charged a child on a tricycle. Lie. Lieutenant Dan can barely charge a snack bowl. The bottom of the flyer read, "Attend the HOA vote this Friday. Let's take our neighborhood back one chicken at a time." Cute. She even made a QR code for RSVP. Very modern for someone who still uses a fax machine. Meanwhile, neighbors started whispering. Some were clearly buying into Karen's hysteria, but others, not so much. Mrs. Avery, the sweet widow across the street, baked me a whole pie for the chickens. The Johnson kids drew sidewalk chalk murals of Carl with angel wings. And Mr. Patel, a retired firefighter, pulled me aside and said, "I don't like Karen. If this turns into a showdown, I've got a smoker and 200 pounds of brisket. Let me know." I decided to fight fire with flair. If Karen wanted a spectacle, then I'd give her one. The day before the HOA vote, I hosted a neighborhood animal rescue open house. The backyard became a wonderland. There were signs explaining each animal's backstory. Carl, retired therapy llama from a senior home. Nugget, saved from a factory farm. The parrot, previously owned by a washed-up Vegas magician. Oreo the goat, rescued from a petting zoo where she was fed nothing but Cheetos. Kids came. Parents followed. Even a few of Karen's loyalists peeked in, curiosity outweighing their loyalty. Mr. Patel brought brisket. The Johnsons set up a lemonade stand. The parrot offered unsolicited commentary on everyone's outfit. Carl wore a bow tie. It was magical. I handed out flyers of my own. This is not a farm. It's a rescue. This is not a problem. It's a purpose. By sunset, Karen's face was priceless. She stood at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, watching the party with the energy of someone trying to mentally will a lightning strike. Then, the cherry on top. The local news van rolled up. Turns out, a parent had posted a video of the parrot saying, "Karen's rules stink worse than the goat," on TikTok, and it went minorly viral. The station sent a reporter for a feel-good neighborhood story. Karen tried to intercept the interview claiming health violations, unapproved gatherings, and potential llama-borne diseases. The reporter blinked. "Llamas spread diseases?" "Yes," she screamed. "They spit. It's toxic." Cut to Carl spitting directly onto the sidewalk like a gangster in a Western movie. The crowd burst out laughing. Karen turned redder than a boiled lobster and fled. That night, as the neighborhood buzzed with joy and goat selfies, I noticed something incredible. A petition was circulating, not Karen's, but mine. It called for a special vote, not to remove the animals, but to remove Karen as HOA president. And by the looks of it, the signatures were stacking up fast. She wanted a vote? She was about to get one she'd never forget. The day of the HOA vote dawned with a sense of impending chaos. The streets of Maple Grove Estates were lined with more cars than usual, as residents from all over gathered at the clubhouse for what promised to be an unforgettable spectacle. This was no longer just about chickens and goats. It was about who got to rule the neighborhood and who didn't. Karen arrived early, as expected, dressed in a suit that was way too formal for a suburban HOA vote. She had a stack of papers in one hand and a look on her face that could freeze lava. Beside her, Marlene, her loyal sidekick, was holding a clipboard, ready to record every supposed infraction I'd committed. They'd been going door to door all week, trying to rally the troops, but it was clear something had shifted. The tide was turning against them. I walked in, wearing a casual t-shirt that read, "I rescued a llama, and all I got was this shirt." I had Carl in tow. Of course, his presence was as necessary as coffee at a morning meeting. The room was filled with tension. Residents sat at folding tables, muttering and whispering. I caught snippets of conversation as I made my way to the front. "Did you see the petition? She's got more animals than Karen's got logic. I'm voting for the goats." Who wouldn't? Even Mrs. Avery gave me a wink and a thumbs up from the back. Finally, the moment arrived. The vote. Karen stood at the podium, paper in hand, her voice steady but strained. "We need to vote on the removal of this rescue zoo. It's disrupting the neighborhood. We need peace." The crowd was silent. Then I stood up. The room went quiet, and all eyes were on me. "I'd like to propose an amendment," I said, my voice calm but firm. "An amendment to remove Karen Strickland as HOA president." Gasps filled the room. I could hear murmurs of agreement, a few chuckles, and even the sound of someone clapping. This wasn't just a vote on chickens anymore. This was personal. Karen's face twisted in disbelief, but she was a fighter. She tried to rally the room, launching into a speech about HOA rules, the sanctity of neighborhoods, and how everything was out of control because of my unregulated farm. But then came the moment Karen couldn't ignore. The local news station's reporter, the same one who had covered the llama spit incident, stood up with a microphone. "I'm afraid there's been a development," she said. "We've received an anonymous tip." A collective gasp swept through the room. The reporter smiled, holding up a copy of the neighborhood's financials. "Karen Strickland," the reporter continued, "has been embezzling HOA funds for years, skimming off the top for personal gain. We've got receipts." There was a stunned silence before the crowd erupted. Papers flew. People gasped, shouted, and pointed fingers. Karen was shaking, her face pale. What? That's not true," she stammered. But it didn't matter anymore. Marlene, looking embarrassed, stepped back and handed over her own stack of documents, evidence of Karen's fraudulent dealings. Turns out, Karen had been padding her paycheck from HOA fines, funneling funds into her own personal accounts under the guise of community projects. In one swift motion, Karen's entire empire crumbled. The vote was taken, and it was a landslide. Karen Strickland was officially removed as HOA president. And, in a final act of defiance, I raised my hand. "I think it's time we also vote on making the rescue zoo a permanent community asset." The crowd cheered. In the weeks that followed, Maple Grove Estates became a different place. The animals were officially recognized as a local attraction, and I even started offering tours for the curious. Karen, on the other hand, disappeared from the neighborhood like a bad memory, leaving behind only a tarnished reputation and a lot of angry residents who'd finally had enough. As for me, I continued running my animal rescue, knowing that no matter how hard someone tried to take me down, the community was behind me. And every day, the animals and I grew stronger together. And as for Karen, well, let's just say she'd finally learned one important lesson. You don't mess with a woman who has a llama, a rescue program, and a community ready to fight back. Like and subscribe for more videos like this.